Before entering the story, please subscribe to the channel, like and share to help me. Thank you. The evolution mistake that nearly killed off humanity ashes over Eden. When the sky turned black 74,000 years ago, the earth convulsed. It began in silence, a shudder beneath the ground deep, almost imperceptible. Then the world tore open. In the heart of what is now Indonesia, the Toba supervolcano exploded with a violence the human mind can barely grasp. Ash shot more than 40 miles into the sky. The explosion was so massive it made modern volcanic eruptions like Mount St. Helens or Krakatoa seem like whispers. Entire forests were incinerated in seconds, rivers boiled, and the sky went dark. For weeks, then months, a black winter settled across the globe. Ash blocked out the sun. Temperatures plunged, plants failed to grow, animals dropped where they stood. The earth had entered a catastrophic volcanic winter, and our ancestors were caught right in the center of it. They were not ready. At this point in history, Homo sapiens were still fragile, scattered, and few. Our total population, if you can even call it that, was likely under 100,000 worldwide. After Toba, that number plummeted. Genetic evidence suggests we may have been reduced to as few as 2,000 reproductive adults. That's it. The entire human species balanced on a knife's edge. One unlucky winter, one failed hunt, one sick child. Any of these could have pushed us into oblivion. The supervolcano didn't just reshape the Earth's surface, it redrew the map of human survival. Africa, once lush with game and green corridors, turned brittle and bare. Lakes evaporated. Herds vanished. The air itself became poison, filled with sulfuric ash. Now imagine what that looked like to the few humans left. A mother, holding her starving child as the winds carried black snow. A small tribe, huddled around dwindling fire, praying to gods they couldn't yet name. A world where hope was reduced to embers. But here's the paradox: the fire that almost killed us may have also forged us. This was no ordinary disaster. This was the crucible, and from it, something began to stir. Something unexpected. Because not all humans perished. Some adapted. Some learned how to read the wind, to travel further, to work together with rival groups, to share, to teach, to remember. But before that could happen, before the spark could ignite, we had to face the void. And the void nearly won. The bottleneck, they call it the genetic bottleneck, a narrow passage through time, where all of humanity was squeezed to the brink of extinction. After the Toba eruption, the human population didn't just shrink, it collapsed. According to mitochondrial DNA studies, nearly all modern humans are descended from a shockingly small group of survivors. The diversity in our genes tells the story. The pool of ancestors shrank to a fraction of what it had been. Every person alive today can trace their lineage back to a few thousand individuals who clung to life during the Black Winter. This wasn't survival, this was desperation. Picture small tribes wandering the wasteland, driven by instinct more than strategy. The air was thick with ash, sunlight barely touched the earth, and temperatures fell to levels never before encountered. Food vanished, migration paths collapsed, familiar hunting grounds became wastelands. Entire clans vanished without a trace, but some held on. In eastern and southern Africa, scattered bands of Homo sapiens began to exhibit signs of something new, something subtle, but crucial: ingenuity. They started to modify their tools, not dramatically but cleverly. Flint points were reshaped, refined, adapted to new prey and new tactics. They sought out new water sources, underground springs, coastal edges, hidden oases, and built temporary shelters. When caves were scarce, some even began foraging from the sea. What does this tell us? It wasn't just the strongest who survived. It was the most adaptive. Those who clung to old ways, those who waited for the weather to return, who refused to move or shift died with their traditions. But those who dared to think differently endured. And here lies a deep irony. The very qualities that make us human, our ability to imagine, to worry, to forecast danger, also made us fragile. Many froze in fear. Many fell into infighting. Some turned on each other. Because when death closes in from all sides, humanity can either unite or unravel. And during this time, we almost unraveled. Imagine the psychological toll. Generations raised on scarcity. Children born into darkness, never seeing blue skies. The memory of abundance became legend, then myth, then gone. Hope shrank with every sunless day. It is tempting to romanticize early humans, but make no mistake, this was survival at its rawest. And yet, even in the middle of this planetary catastrophe, somehow humans began to show signs of something deeper than instinct, something that couldn't be measured in strength or speed, something that might have saved us. Slines of Africa, under skies choked with ash, our ancestors started to look inward. They didn't just survive, they imagined ways to survive. This was the birth of something unseen before. Cognitive leap. We see evidence of this in the archaeological record fragments of red ochre with abstract markings found in caves like Blombos. To the untrained eye, they may seem meaningless, but to anthropologists, they suggest symbolic thought, memory, identity, maybe even spirituality. What kind of mind picks up a rock and carves into it? Not for hunting, not for building, but to say something. That kind of mind was new, and this newness mattered because something had shifted in the brain of Homo sapiens, not dramatically, not overnight, but just enough to begin making connections between the stars and the seasons, between cause and effect, between fire and warmth, between a dangerous predator's track and the decision to move camp before it returns, and most importantly, between each other. They began to cooperate in ways no other species could, not just hunting together but planning, adapting, sharing skills across generations. This wasn't just survival, it was culture in its earliest form. When the volcano blanketed the earth in death, nature was brutal and indifferent, but humans were not. Around fires, stories were told. Around scarcity, empathy emerged. When children cried, others stepped in to help, not for reward, not for gain, but because they felt something. This capacity for imagination, connection, and empathy became the very thing that would eventually lift us out of extinction's grasp. It wasn't the strongest who made it through the Toba catastrophe. It wasn't the fastest or the fiercest. It was those who could adapt, those who could imagine what didn't yet exist, those who could feel and remember and choose differently. The fire outside nearly killed us, but the fire within that ancient, flickering will to connect and evolve, that's what saved us. And it was only the beginning. The evolutionary trap. Intelligence isn't always an advantage. It's easy to believe intelligence is a superpower, that because we can think, we can survive. But history doesn't always agree. After Toba, the humans who remained faced more than just nature. As fury, they faced a silent enemy hidden inside their own minds, overthinking, fear, division. See, the human brain evolved fast. In some ways, our intelligence gave us fire, tools, language, but it also gave us fear of the unknown, tribal loyalty, suspicion of outsiders, and an addiction to short-term comfort. In evolutionary terms, that's a dangerous cocktail. As the world changed beneath their feet, many of our ancestors didn't evolve forward. They regressed. They clung harder to what was known. Old hunting paths, old rituals, old leaders. But the world they knew no longer existed. Rain didn't come. Herds didn't migrate. The sky stayed dark. And when the outside world becomes hostile, where does the mind retreat? Inward, toward suspicion, toward blame, toward separation. Small tribes grew paranoid. One group saw another approaching and feared they'd take food or territory. Cooperation broke. Violence flared. We call ourselves a social species, but under stress, the human mind reverts to survival instincts. And sometimes, those instincts are deadly. This is the trap. Intelligence creates complexity. Complexity creates fear. Fear creates isolation, and isolation in a hostile world is fatal. Meanwhile, other hominid species, Neanderthals, Denisovans, walked the earth too, stronger in build, better adapted to cold, braver, even in the face of certain challenges. So why did they disappear? One theory suggests they fell into the same trap, advanced enough to survive in comfort, but not adaptable enough to survive in chaos, because chaos is not just physical, it's psychological. It is waking up one morning and realizing the world you depended on has vanished, and you must now invent a new one, from scratch. Most species can't do that. Most minds collapse under that pressure, but a few didn't. A few found clarity in the storm, and that is what sets the survivors apart. Fragile minds in a brutal world. The human brain is a miracle, dense with neurons, wired for memory, language, strategy, but in the aftermath of the supervolcano, that miracle became a liability. Because it didn't take much for the human mind to spiral. We are pattern seekers by design. It's how we survived. By noticing rustling grass meant danger, or dark clouds meant rain. But under the gray skies of Toba's winter, nothing made sense anymore. Patterns collapsed. Familiar seasons stopped arriving. Animal tracks vanished. Crops failed to sprout. And in that silence, the mind began to invent explanations. Some groups turned to superstition, believing the gods had abandoned them, others blamed neighboring tribes, scapegoating those who looked or spoke differently. Some simply gave up, losing the will to endure in a world that no longer seemed to respond to effort. The evolutionary mistake wasn't intelligence, it was emotional fragility. We had developed complex thought, yes, but without the emotional armor to stabilize it. We could imagine a better future and also imagine every possible way it could fall apart. We were smart enough to build plans, but scared enough to abandon them at the first setback. And fear, once it spreads, is contagious. One person panics, another follows. One tribe turns hostile, another prepares to retaliate. Soon, survival isn't about weathering nature, it's about avoiding each other. But not everyone fell into this spiral. A handful of groups began to display something rare: resilience. They didn't run from the unknown, they explored it. They didn't hoard food, they shared, coordinated, traded. They didn't collapse into fear, they rose into leadership. Anthropologists now believe that it was these adaptive communities, the ones that could regulate emotion, improvise socially, and develop trust, that laid the groundwork for what would one day become civilization. But that resilience had to come from somewhere. It wasn't taught in schools. It wasn't passed down in books. It came from firelight conversations, from watching others endure, from remembering the faces of those who chose courage when everyone else fled. Because evolution doesn't just shape the body, it shapes behavior. And when the world burns, it's not the smartest who survive. It's the ones who stay calm in the fire. Fear, division, and the narrow escape. What nearly destroyed us wasn't the ash, the cold, or the hunger. It was us. Our fear, our mistrust, our stubborn grip on old patterns when the world demanded new ones. This is the mistake evolution handed us, a brilliant mind trapped in an emotional system, still wired for the jungle. We could invent tools that pierce bone, but we couldn't pierce through our own doubts. We could build shelters from storms, but not from betrayal. We could form groups, but turn on them the moment they challenged our pride. It's not hard to see how close we came to erasing ourselves. Some tribes isolated, others turned to violence. Some just faded into the cold. Their stories dying with them. The Neanderthals, with their powerful bodies and simpler social structures, couldn't adapt fast enough. The Denisovans vanished almost entirely, yet Homo sapiens, flawed, fearful, but deeply social, managed to hold on. Barely. And here's the terrifying truth. We didn't solve our evolutionary flaws, we carried them forward. The tribalism that once made small group survival possible, it became war. The fear that once helped us detect danger, it became anxiety. The tendency to blame others when things went wrong, it became politics, division, hatred. Even today, you can still feel it. We still fear what we don't understand. We still push away those who look different. We still cling to comfort even when it kills potential. Because the mistake of evolution wasn't that it made us too weak. It's that it made us just smart enough to imagine survival, but not wise enough to see our own patterns of destruction. So how do we survive? We'll explore that next, because something else evolved during that long darkness. Something fragile, but powerful. Something that defied instinct, imagination, story, connection, and belief. That's where the next chapter begins. The spark that saved us, the first light in the darkness. It didn't happen overnight. No lightning bolt came down from the sky. No god appeared to grant fire, wisdom, or language. It began with something smaller, almost invisible, a spark. After the ash settled and Earth began to breathe again, small bands of humans emerged, not as conquerors, but as survivors who had been forever changed. They had been tested by ice, famine, fear, and one another. But they had also learned something vital. That survival wasn't about the strongest individual. It was about the strongest bond. This is where the spark began. Archaeological evidence shows signs of sudden, dramatic innovation in Africa shortly after the Toba catastrophe. We find early hard-tread ochre pieces etched with patterns in the Blombos cave, bone tools, refined arrowheads, signs of organized campsites, shell beads, carved deliberately, strung together into necklaces. These were not accidents. They were signals, symbols, stories. For the first time in recorded evolution, humans weren't just reacting to the world, they were interpreting it. Why did they do this? Because something in them knew. Knowledge must outlive the body. A lesson must travel. A warning must pass. An identity must be remembered. This was the birth of culture, and it likely came from necessity. When everything familiar collapses, the only way to move forward is to create meaning, to take chaos and shape it into something shareable. That's what story is. That's what art is. That's what survival became. It's one thing to hunt, eat, sleep, and run, but it's another thing entirely to sit around a fire and explain why. And so the spark caught flame. Fire became sacred not just for heat, but for gathering. Language became more than commands, it became memory. Gesture turned to rhythm, rhythm turned to music, music turned into identity. What saved us wasn't just strategy, it was imagination. The courage to believe in things not yet seen, the wisdom to pass those beliefs down, and the strength to do it together. The supervolcano nearly wiped us out, but in the rubble, we invented hope, the rise of collective. Mind something changed in our species, not just physically, but mentally. We started thinking together. Where once each tribe acted as its own island, guarded, isolated, suspicious now, some groups began reaching beyond. We find evidence of tools and ornaments being transported hundreds of kilometers from where they were made. That means one thing, trade, and trade means trust. Somehow, amidst the chaos, a new concept emerged. You are not my enemy, you are my mirror. This was the beginning of what anthropologists call collective cognition, the ability of humans to pool knowledge, to transmit information across generations and distances. And it's this, more than any physical evolution, that rewrote our fate, because no other species did this. Not the Neanderthals, not the Denisovans, not even early Homo erectus, only us. While other hominins perfected their local environments, becoming masters of a region, we became generalists, able to adapt to anywhere, from deserts to tundra, from forest to coast. Humans began to stretch further, faster, with each generation. Why? Because now, a child didn't need to start from scratch. They were born into story, into memory, into culture. This was our leap, and it was fragile, because all of it, every song, every symbol, every fire circle tale depended on one thing, connection. Without trust, stories die. Without stories, memory dies. Without memory, we vanish. But some kept the flame. Some passed down stories of the black skies and the death winds. Some taught their children not just how to survive, but why they must never forget. And out of that came something new, identity. We were no longer just hunters. We were humans with shared myths, shared fears, shared destinies. The volcano fractured the earth, but it forged our minds. And the same species that once hovered near extinction began to rise. Fire, memory, and the birth of meaning. The fire gave us more than warmth. It gave us time. Time to speak, to reflect, to remember. And around those fires, in the bitter cold after the black winter, humans began to invent something no other creature on Earth had, the future. Before this, animals lived in the now. Even our ancient ancestors focused only on the next hunt, the next shelter, the next day. But post-Toba humans, they started to plan, not just for tomorrow, for next season, for next generation. And this required a completely new way of thinking. You can see it in the artifacts, tools shaped with precision, caches of food buried for later, graves carefully prepared for the dead, carvings and bones, stones and walls that's not for use, but for message. These were not survival instincts. They were signs of conscious design, a people imagining themselves as part of something bigger than a moment, part of a story. And stories, they became more powerful than any tool. A story could warn, a story could unite, a story could inspire. Remember the ash, one might say. Remember what the cold took from us. Remember what the fire gave back. These weren't myths, they were blueprints. Survival passed through ritual, adaptation passed through metaphor, and identity passed through meaning. So while other hominins tried to endure with strength, we survived with something invisible yet infinitely more powerful. Belief. Belief that the sun would return. Belief that life could be rebuilt. Belief that humans, though broken, could rise again. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't perfect. But it was enough. And that fragile network of ideas, of shared memory, empathy, and imagination would one day build cities, send ships across oceans, and launch satellites into the stars. But it started here, in the ruins, around a fire, with a whisper. We survived. We still carry the flaw, ancient fears. In a modern world, we like to think we've evolved. We've built skyscrapers, invented the internet, mapped the human genome. But underneath all that brilliance, beneath the polished glass, beneath the satellites, we are still the same fragile creatures who once trembled beneath the black sky. The evolutionary mistake that almost killed us, we never truly left it behind. That fear of outsiders, it's still alive in politics, in prejudice, in how we judge the unfamiliar. That craving for comfort, even when it's killing us, is still there in every unhealthy habit, every addiction to ease, and that short-sighted thinking, that inability to see the storm coming until it's too late. It's alive in how we ignore crisis until it becomes catastrophe. We carry the same wiring that once nearly erased our entire species. Back then, it almost led to extinction. Today, it leads to self-sabotage. We overreact to imagined threats and ignore real ones. We form tribes not based on wisdom but on echo chambers. We trust the loudest voice, not the wisest. And worst of all, we forget history. We forget how close we came, and that forgetting is dangerous. Because the world faces new volcanoes now, not made of ash but of division, misinformation, overconsumption, and apathy. They are slower, quieter, but just as deadly. So the question becomes, if we survived Toba by evolving our minds, can we survive today by evolving our consciousness? Can we move beyond fear, beyond impulse, beyond short-term safety? Can we this time not wait for the skies to turn black before we change? That's the real test. Because fire and ice may no longer be our enemy, but ourselves. That battle has only just begun. Modern traps, ancient wiring, look around. We are surrounded by miracles, electric light, clean water, global communication, medicine that can rewrite DNA. We've conquered diseases that once decimated populations. We can send messages across oceans in seconds. We can live longer, eat better, and connect further than any human in history ever dreamed. And yet, anxiety is higher than ever. Depression is widespread. Addictions, isolation, burnout is all rising. Why? Because we weren't built for this world. We were built for scarcity, for danger, for threat. Our nervous systems are still tuned to survive the jungle, not scroll through 1,000 headlines before breakfast. We are still reacting to modern noise with ancient reflexes. When someone disagrees with us online, our brain registers it as a tribal threat. When we feel left out, it's as if the tribe has abandoned us and we panic. When we don't get instant results, we quit because our ancestors rarely had to wait months or years for reward. They need it now, or they starved. The flaw isn't that we're weak. It's that we're running powerful software on outdated hardware. We inherited a system optimized for immediate survival, not long-term fulfillment. And unless we learn to recognize that, to see when our ancient instincts are hijacking our modern lives, we will keep sabotaging ourselves. This is why so many people chase comfort, but feel empty. Why we choose distraction over discipline. Why we fight battles that don't matter while ignoring the ones that do. Because the same brain that helped us survive the Ice Age is now drowning in information, overstimulated, overloaded, and utterly confused about what the real dangers are. We weren't designed for abundance. So when abundance came, we didn't evolve to handle it, we collapsed under it. And just like after Toba, we face a choice, repeat the same mistake, or evolve our minds on purpose this time. Because the next era of human survival won't be about tools or shelter or strength. It will be about mastering ourselves. The choice to evolve consciously. Here's the truth most people run from. We are no longer at the mercy of volcanoes. We are at the mercy of our own decisions. We've mastered the earth, but we haven't mastered ourselves. And that's the final frontier, not Mars, not AI, not immortality. It's conscious evolution, the decision to rise above the instincts that once kept us alive, but now hold us back. Because what saved us after Toba wasn't strength, and it wasn't luck. It was awareness, a flicker of self-reflection, a moment of choice. Our ancestors could have turned on each other completely. They could have scattered, fought, vanished. But some paused. They shared. They taught. They adapted. They chose to cooperate, even when fear screamed otherwise. That choice saved the world. And now, in an era of distraction, division, and decay, we face the same choice again. We can keep chasing dopamine and comfort and outrage, or we can build firelight again, not in caves, but in minds. We can sit down with our fears and name them. We can rewrite the stories we inherited. We can forge discipline where instinct tells us to retreat, because evolution is no longer happening to us. Now, it's our responsibility. Every time you resist comfort to build character, every time you step past fear to tell the truth, every time you rise when you could have crumbled, you are becoming more than a survivor. You are becoming a new kind of human. And maybe that's the real story. Not how close we came to extinction, but how close we are to something greater. If we remember what nearly killed us and why we survived at all. We came from ashes, from black skies, from frozen soil, from fire that nearly swallowed the earth. We were never guaranteed survival. We earned it one breath, one choice, one fragile step at a time. But it wasn't just nature that tested us. It was ourselves. Our fear, our instinct to run, to hide, to divide, to cling to comfort while the world changed around us. And yet, we rose, not because we were stronger, but because a few dared to imagine a world beyond disaster, because a few looked into the void and built meaning. That spark, it still lives in you, right now, in a world full of noise and comfort and distraction. The same decision lies before you. Will you evolve, or will you repeat the mistake? Because modern life may not have ash clouds or saber-toothed tigers, but it has softer, deadlier enemies, self-doubt, comfort, excuses, the slow extinction of purpose. But the fire is still there. It's in your discipline. It's in your ability to adapt. It's in your courage to choose growth when everything around you whispers stay safe. You are the descendant of the survivors, the ones who endured the dark, who passed the flame, who refused to vanish. So now, it's your turn. Build yourself, sharpen your mind, strengthen your will, and above all remember who you are, because the same force that almost destroyed us is the same force we now have the power to conquer ourselves. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something ancient awaken inside you, subscribe. Share this fire with someone who needs it. And remember, the evolution didn't end in the past. It begins with your next decision.